Okay, you are about to hear one of the most unbelievable and honestly, kind of terrifying true stories I have ever come across. Get ready for the story of the Radioactive Boy Scout.
Seriously, think about it for a second. What was it? A wobbly treehouse? Maybe a potato cannon? Or a skateboard ramp that was definitely not safe? We've all had those little projects, right?
Well, for one teenager, the answer was, and I'm not kidding, a nuclear reactor. A homemade, working, and incredibly dangerous radioactive breeder reactor that he built in a backyard shed. So how in the world did this happen? Let's dig in.
We're actually going to start this story at the end, at the exact moment it all came crashing down, because the scene itself is it's straight out of a movie.
So picture this. It's a totally normal street, right? Manicured lawns, kids on bikes, the whole suburban dream. And then bam! Guys in full-body hazmat suits show up, setting up a perimeter, treating this one little house like a major radiological disaster. You can just imagine the neighbors peeking through their blinds, wondering what on earth is going on.
So why all the commotion? Well, the radiation levels coming from a tiny shed in the backyard were over 1,000 times the normal, safe background level. This wasn't some tiny leak. This was a full-blown contamination event.
I mean, even the official Environmental Protection Agency report sounds shocked. They wrote that the residents had no idea that a radiological emergency was brewing in their midst. An entire neighborhood was completely unaware they were living next to a ticking time bomb.
And that's the big question, right? It sounds like something from a comic book. How does a kid's hobby trigger a federal emergency response? To figure that out, we have to go back to the beginning and meet the kid who started it all.
All right, so this whole story really boils down to one person, a teenager named David Hahn. And his journey, it didn't start with any bad intentions. It started with a curiosity that just grew and grew into something incredibly dangerous. David was not your average kid. He was completely obsessed. He got a chemistry set at 10 and just devoured this book, The Golden Book of Chemistry Experiments, which, by the way, was later pulled from libraries for being too dangerous. His big goal was kind of like a science nerd's version of collecting Pokemon. He wanted to get a sample of every single element on the periodic table. A pretty cool goal if you think about it. But things escalated really fast. At 10, he's doing simple stuff. By 14, he's accidentally brewing actual nitroglycerin that blows a hole in his bedroom wall. His parents, as you can imagine, were not thrilled. They moved his lab to the basement and then, finally, kicked him out to that backyard potting shed, the very same one the hazmat team would later have to take apart. And here's the most surreal part of the story that's already packed with them. What pushed David from being a chemistry whiz to a backyard nuclear physicist? It was his quest to earn the Atomic Energy Badge for the Boy Scouts. No joke. The pamphlet for the badge had this little diagram of a reactor, and for most kids it's just a drawing. For David, it was a blueprint.
And let's be super clear here. He wasn't just trying to make a little spark. He was aiming for the holy grail of nuclear science, a breeder reactor. This is the kind of super advanced technology that governments with billion-dollar budgets struggle to create. And a 17-year-old was trying to build one in a shed with stuff he could find at the store.
So that leads to the obvious question. How on earth did a teenager get his hands on radioactive materials? Well, the answer is equal parts brilliant and terrifying.
This is just pure, dangerous ingenuity. He pretended to be a physics professor so he could get a hold of smoke detectors for the Americium inside. He hunted through antique shops for old clocks just to scrape the radium off the glow-in-the-dark dials. He bought camping lanterns in bulk for the thorium in the little mesh mantles. He then figured out how to combine these things to make a crude neutron gun to start the reaction. It was a masterclass in DIY atomic scavenging.
And let's just pause and remember where this was all happening. Not some high-tech, lead-lined laboratory, not a secret bunker. A tiny 10 by 10 foot garden shed, probably right next to a lawnmower and some bags of potting soil. The absurdity is just off the charts. And here's the crazy part. It was working. This is the moment David's dream basically turned into a nightmare. The radiation levels got so high, so fast, that he realized he had built something he absolutely could not control. When his homemade Geiger counter started picking up radiation from down the block, he knew he was in way over his head.
So, in a total panic, David started trying to dismantle his reactor.
But it was way too late. His frantic attempts to get rid of the radioactive materials by loading them into the trunk of his car eventually tipped off the police. And that's what brings us right back to where we started, with the hazmat team on his front lawn.
The transformation was just staggering. One day, it's a secret hobby lab. The next, it's a federal Superfund site. The cleanup cost $60,000 back in 1995. That's well over $100,000 in today's money, all to decontaminate one tiny shed.
The whole cleanup was a massive operation. The shed was taken apart piece by piece. Everything inside, his tools, the reactor core, even the dirt, was sealed up in 39 different barrels and shipped off to be buried at a radioactive waste dump in Utah. And maybe the wildest part? Because no law really covered what he'd done, David was never criminally charged for any of it. Ever since then, David's story has become a piece of scientific folklore. It's this powerful cautionary tale about unchecked ambition and about that razor-thin line that separates genius from total catastrophe. It's a story about what happens when intense curiosity isn't balanced with a little bit of wisdom.
And this quote from David himself is just so telling. It really gives you a peek into his mind. Even after everything that happened, he still saw his project with this kind of innocent wonder. He wasn't trying to build a weapon. He was trying to create something amazing, a star in a jar. And it just adds this layer of tragedy to the whole thing.
And really, that's what this story leaves us with. David Hahn was obviously brilliant. He was resourceful and unbelievably driven. But his project put an entire community at risk. It makes you ask yourself, at what point does that noble search for knowledge cross over into just plain dangerous obsession? Something to think about.